I want to get started with just an overview of what you should expect to find here when you listen to these lessons and exercises. The reason I went about putting this content together is more or less a result of seeing a couple barriers I felt needed to be broken. First of all, I came about learning non-dual awareness through Sam Harris's Waking Up app. I personally found the recognition profound. To be clear, I don't know Sam Harris, so I'm not suggesting anywhere that he would agree with any of my exercises or lessons. What I can say, however, is that when I hear him describe his non-dual experience, I agree with his description. I also understand what he's saying, and I find my experience identical. So based on my introduction to non-dual awareness through him, I can't recommend enough that if you want to learn this, I would first point you to his Waking Up app. His introductory course is a great starting point. In fact, it might be best just to stop this introduction right now. Head over to the Waking Up app and spend a month going through the introductory course. You might not need these lessons to get it. However, if you've already been through his course, if you've listened to quite a few of his conversations, and you feel like you just don't get it, you are my audience for these lessons. For many, there is a steep learning curve for non-dual awareness, and I heard many listeners in Waking Up were hitting a brick wall. This was the first barrier that interested me in putting together these exercises and lessons. I wanted to create more content for interested people to explore. I know he has stated multiple times that he was running out of new ways to describe how to get from the more commonly practiced dual awareness, mindfulness, to a non-dual awareness. That was one of my first prompts in creating this content. If you have hit a wall after going through his app, I would say you're in the right place. The second reason I felt compelled to put together content was that I was pretty disappointed in the lack of direction conveyed by meditation experts in the Waking Up app. I have been through many interviews and conversations. I can tell Sam is trying to tease out some unique perspective and knowledge, trying to help his audience along. Unfortunately, I have found many of their responses, when prompted by Sam, to lack much substance. Responses like "words can't describe" have been disappointing additions to an audience hungry to learn. So I want to set the stage for what you will and will not find here. If you have ever tried to calm the mind through instructions like focus on the breath at the exclusion of all other things, and release all worries and thoughts for 10 minutes, only to notice that you are either continuously worrying or, instead, just continuously thinking the thought, "Don't worry," for 10 minutes before just giving up. Thankfully, you will not find that here. In my experience, that doesn't work. You're not going to find religious dogma here. I'm not some kind of guru. I'm not versed in any Eastern religion, and I don't have any interest in the religious components of them. I don't know the traditions that Sam knows. The extent of my knowledge of Eastern traditions comes solely through his conversations, and it really just stops there. Instead, my background is scientific. As a surgeon, my education included undergraduate studies in biology, then medical school, followed by a surgical residency, and finally, a subspecialty surgical fellowship. I really gravitate towards the sciences, and this will be a journey of first-person observation, not belief. If you are someone who says, "I just want the facts," I will likely be a good resource for you. Here's my current framework. Even though I would not place any weighting on any of the other metaphysical beliefs of Eastern religion, I do place a pretty high value on the recognition of the so-called awakened mind. There really is something here that shouldn't be missed. But I want to make clear that even the term awakened mind makes me shudder. It does have Eastern religious connotations. None of that needs to be incorporated here. I've started by putting together a sort of progression of lessons and exercises. By the end, I want to provide you the tools with 2 goals in mind. Only 2. The first one, I want you to be able to recognize with certainty that you cannot find a central self at the middle of experience. And number 2, likely the reason you found these lessons, I want you to be able to experience the so-called non-dual flow state. I have found that these two recognitions go hand in hand. For me, personally, the visual field, juxtaposed with thought, is the reproducible technique to recognize non-dual flow state. For this reason, we're going to spend the majority of our lessons with eyes open. My suspicion for why so many people hit a brick wall when attempting this is that there is a lack of basic understanding of what is meant by the first-person experience. For this reason, I think that a foundation for what even constitutes the first person needs to be laid at the beginning. So, I wanted to start with a couple litmus tests of concentration and attention. The reason for these is meant to show you the amount of concentration I feel like you're going to need to notice subtle characteristics of experience from the first person. Following that, we're going to move on to specific mechanics of the mind. You're going to need a posture of curiosity, as I hope you discover things that have been overlooked for decades. I know I did. Then, we're going to set out to prove, without any doubt, that we are not our thoughts. To be honest, if you pass the litmus test, this should be fairly quick to establish. Next, we'll set out to recognize that we're not even the source or the author of our thoughts. We're as surprised as anyone else would be with what thought arises next in our mind. Although this can be recognized fairly quickly, you're also going to discover that the intuition that you're somehow still the author will continually creep back in. Next, we're going to spend time inspecting the sense of an ego, the self, the central subject. These are terms that you probably understand to some degree already. I like to frame this as trying to find the central vessel in experience where everything comes together, where the world and the narrative is being viewed from. This part can be very interesting and engaging. It really is like trying to find the end of the rainbow. You swear it's right there, but it can't be found. I can't stress enough that this portion really requires us being on the same page. So I have created a couple conceptual lessons as well as some first-person exercises that should give us the foundation to work through this. Concepts like emptiness and selflessness will be explored, not from an Eastern tradition standpoint, but rather from a Western cultural background. We're going to explore an analogy I hope will be more accessible in getting what is meant by these concepts. We're then going to spend time learning not only how to properly inspect the self, but just as important, where to inspect. Both are very important topics, and I think should really help you. Once we get through that content, we'll have the groundwork laid to really do the searching. I want you to be confident that what you are doing is correct, so you're confident in the conclusions you find. Spoiler alert, you're not going to find the self you thought was there. Once we work through that, we're going to see what's left. I have personally found that it is when you have learned this progression of first-person interrogation that you are better equipped to recognize the non-dual nature of experience. So, if you have gotten stuck, unable to recognize what is understood to be the pinnacle of the mindfulness endeavor, my hope is to provide you a path forward. Let me end by apologizing for the quality of the audio. I realize it's not up to contemporary streaming standards, but if you can forgive me for these shortcomings and really focus on the instructions, we should be able to achieve the stated goals.